Hi, everyone, and a warm welcome to another episode of the Talkroom series of podcasts. Our goal is to explore how you can be your very best self, even when faced with the challenges of relationship concerns, by leveraging the power of counselling and therapeutic support. I'm Ian, and today we're diving into this incredibly important topic of worry. And for those people who have yet to see any of our previous podcasts, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Wendy. Wendy is a highly experienced, accredited cognitive behavioural therapist, psychotherapist, and EMDR therapist in private practice. She's been involved in the field of mental health and well-being for well over 35 years.
Thank you very much, Ian. And I'd like to introduce you now. And you are a senior accredited National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society member, and also the founder of Hope Therapy and Counselling Services. So a warm welcome to you, Ian.
Thank you, Wendy. And today we're focused on the topic of worry. And why do you think that this is an important topic for us to cover today, Wendy? Maybe you can just start by talking a little bit
Yeah,
about
absolutely, Ian. So I think in the UK, the reason I wanted to cover it today is there is a real increase of worry-related issues. For example, research suggests that a common source of worry, including financial concerns, health issues, and often work-related stress. I mean, financial worries at the moment are particularly prevalent, with many individuals anticipating difficult financial times ahead. So, currently, the specific factors contributing to increased worry in the UK, they include economic challenges such as economy not doing as well, economy being sort of very sluggish in its growth, uncertain happenings with work and businesses. And also, there's an ongoing issue around sort of political uncertainties as well. There's not much faith, I think, in the politics at the moment. And then, of course, personally, this can really affect our worries. So, people facing worry or financial strain due to sort of work-related stresses. Health concerns are becoming even worse now, often due to the difficulty getting a GP appointment, or having very long waiting lists as well. So these sort of leave people with more feelings of anxiety and worry. And also, another group of people who are experiencing more worry are young adults, particularly the age of 18 to 24. Research suggests they're reporting very high levels of stress, with about 86% of them feeling stressed at least once a month. So the research and records are showing they're higher and getting worse, not getting better at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it really seems as if worry is increasing at the moment due to a number of different factors that you've identified. Um, but there also seems to be a lot more uncertainty at the moment as well.
Yes, Ian, I think that's the key issue. It's a combination, I think, of having to deal with real life issues, coupled with the difficulty of tolerating uncertainty. This can really cause the worry symptoms, especially with people who, and we all like this, we'd like a degree of certainty in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And often you hear that phrase, "Don't worry about it," but it's not always that easy, is it?
Yes, I totally agree there, Ian. It's a phrase that we banter around, but actually, what does that mean? And does it actually help us? Um, but the good news I want to talk to about today is there are definitely strategies which are well researched. They're called evidence-based strategies that can really help deal with worry symptoms. And I wanted to bring up today because I talk a lot about worry as a therapist in my sessions. So I'm sure it's a universal problem. Um, cognitive behavioural therapy is widely regarded as one of the most effective treatments for worry. Um, and CBT focuses on a number of things, but one of its key areas is identifying negative thought patterns and then changing them so that they're actually a little bit more balanced and realistic, and also changing behaviours which are associated with worry. But there are also some other therapies I quite like to talk about as well. Is that okay? Can I give you some examples, Ian?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing I think is a really useful technique in cognitive behavior therapy. It's called conceptualization. I think this is rather a complicated word, but what it really means is getting an overview of your worry and how it affects you. So, for example, you identify a trigger, a negative trigger or situation, and then you write down your reactions. Specifically, you write down how you feel about that trigger, the thoughts associated with that trigger. You write down any physical sensations you're having, and then also the behaviors. So, if I can give an example. So, say there's a story on the news about a prediction that there'll be job cuts this year. A person may then think, oh no, that is bound to happen to me. So that's the trigger. And that will start them to feel fear, experience physical symptoms of anxiety, for example, heart pounding. And then the behavior will be probably for them to worry about this negative prediction it's going to happen to me. And by worrying on it, it actually accentuates the emotions and the physical symptoms even more. So they actually accentuate the fear, they accentuate the physical sensations. And as a result, they're under more stress and they're more likely to feel unwell because of their increased stress levels. But it's actually a future threat that hasn't even happened yet. It's just an announcement on the television. So if you understand these processes, this can help you to be more aware of your patterns. And then the next step is how to stop it happening in the first place.
So that makes perfect sense. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the types of strategies that do help with work.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so one of my best and favorite strategies for coping with worry is to decide whether the worry is something they can do something about or not. So if they can do something about the worry, then the idea is to apply what I would call a problem solving strategy. An example of this would be you actually brainstorm a lot of solutions to this problem. Once you brainstorm the solutions, then you go through, you pick, say, 5 of your ones you think are the most realistic. You go through the pros and cons of each of these solutions, and then you decide from there which are the best ones, and then write down a clear plan of action. Now, sometimes worries are not that, sometimes problems aren't that clear. Sometimes you can have a combination of things. A person can do something about the worry, then they use a problem solving model. And there may be parts of the situation they can't do something about. And then there's other strategies to deal with those. So if there is something that you can do something about the worry, use a problem solving. If there's elements where you can't help but solve the problem, then thought records work very well. I'm just going to explain these now. So thought records are a really, really good way to identify, challenge, and actually reframe the worry inducing thoughts. So the first step is literally writing down a situation that triggered the worry. And then the next step would be writing down all the thoughts that arose. Like if you go through that example of I'm bound to lose that job, I'm bound to lose my job. So that will be a negative thought that you can write down that you've had from that situation. And then the next step, you're encouraged to evaluate the evidence supporting these thoughts and also those that contradict these thoughts. And it's also quite good to actually think about how you think. So, for example, it's called a thinking distortion. So, am I really catastrophizing? Am I going to the worst case scenario? Or am I thinking all or nothing thinking? So what that means is I'm thinking everything's going to go wrong in the future. Nothing's going to go right. Everything's all going to go bad. And you can hear by that thinking that also contributes to worry. But then the next step is by, after noticing all these negative thoughts that are causing the worry, you start to work on writing down more helpful thoughts, which are more balanced, perhaps based more on facts, more on logic. And you're actually encouraging people to develop a better way of thinking. And this is really key to cognitive behavioural therapy. So they can really help you to break the cycle of chronic worry and developing more rational, less fear-driven interpretations of daily events. And so if you keep doing this with practice time and time again, most people start writing them down with using a thought record chart. And after a while, people start to do it in their head. So they start to get better and better at challenging the negative thoughts. So just to use a practical example, the worry is, I'm going to lose my job. So that is the negative thought that came from the TV. So look as though whether there's any factual evidence for this. Okay. If there is none, and then you can work on replacing this worry thought, something like, this is just a future thought. There is zero evidence I'm going to lose my job. I know I can't be 100% certain, but there's actually the company's doing well. I've been there for a very long time. I'm very settled in my job. It's very highly unlikely to lose my job. If there is some evidence that you think you might lose your job, and then you can go into problem solving mode to do something about it. So I hope that makes sense. So thought records are one strategy. Another one, which I quite like, is called worry postponement. So this strategy, focusing on managing the tendency to ruminate by teaching people to schedule worry time. So what I mean by that is what often people do is who worry, they go over and over the worry again and again and again. That's called ruminating, just thinking over and over again about your thoughts, trying to analyze them, trying to change them, and often doesn't work. Okay. So rather attempting to not worry about things and suppress it, which can intensify them, the idea is that you set aside a specific time each day, say, for example, 10 to 20 minutes, and then when you really focus exclusively on your worries. So when a worry thought arises outside this windows, you are encouraged to acknowledge the worry and then mentally postpone the worry until the scheduled time. So you actually sort of put it on the shelf, I quite often say. So, okay, I'm not going to worry about it now, but I do need to worry about it. So I'm going to allow myself to worry about it during my worry time. So this really helps constant worrying, constant ruminating about the worries, and allows people to really fully engage in their daily activities. And then over time, most people find that the time the worry time arrives, the thoughts have diminished in intensity or relevance, reinforcing that not all worries require immediate attention. So this practice really helps promote helping you to calm your emotions down and reduces the impact of worrying all the time on your daily life. And also in your worry time, you can actually practice worry techniques. So you can actually go through and use a worry diary, a worry thought record in the time when you allocate the worry. And just a little tip about the postponing worry. It's not a good thing to do it last thing at night because you don't want to sort of get into the habit of worrying. Early evening is a good time to do that as well. So another technique is called behavioural experiments or reality testing. So behavior experiments explain what it is. It's actually changing your behavior. And the idea is to challenge the worry thoughts by testing them in real life situations. So, for example, people are encouraged to predict the outcomes of feared events and then actually engage in the scenario to actually look at the facts, see what's going to happen. So, for instance, a good example would be if somebody's worrying about being judged during a meeting, they may agree and discuss with the therapist that they're going to express an opinion purposely and observe the reactions of others. So maybe if a person's always smiling and never say anything in a meeting because they fear being judged, the example of behavioural experiment, they might actually sort of join in and make a comment. Okay. And actually, by doing this, the actual outcome is often far less worse than anticipated. So, by actually getting to the habit of challenging these worries by changing your behavior, what people often learn is that their worry predictions are usually exaggerated and unfounded. So, by actually putting this into practice, the learning weakens the association between the fears and thoughts about worry and danger, reducing overall anxiety. And also by doing things practically, it really helps to improve the confidence of the person and their actually belief in able to handle uncertainty. And it also promotes long-term resilience against excessive worry. So that's another great tip. I really, really enjoy that. Another one is desensitization. So this is actually gradually exposing people to anxiety-provoking stimuli. And also you can do this by adding in relaxation strategies to counteract anxiety response. So the idea is that you write down with a therapist an exposure hierarchy. And this is where the fear situations are ranked in order, a bit like actually doing a step ladder. And you start with the least to the most anxiety inducing. So you start with the least frightening scenario, and the person confronts a situation, learns actually how to deal with anxiety by employing relaxation techniques such as deep breathing. And over time, this method helps to diminish the fear response associated with each stimulus, therefore overcoming worry levels. So a good example of this is if somebody's got a fear, say a fear of getting into lifts. So you write down all the steps to actually getting into a lift. So the first one might be going up to the lift. The second one might be pushing the button. The next one might be going into the lift, then out the lift. The next one might be going in and going up one floor and then getting out the lift. The next one might be going up two floors and getting out the lift. So it might be actually going the lift on your own or going in when there's lots of people. So you actually discuss these stages with the individual. You agree them beforehand, and then they take those steps and actually increase their confidence in those steps. So that's another really good one. Another thing which isn't very used very much, but I think is a very, very good one, it's called virtual reality exposure. So this is where you need a little bit of technology. And the idea is that you expose yourself to situations in a simulated environment. So this is very useful for situations which are difficult to replicate in real life, such as flying or public speaking. So the control setting helps people to face their fears simply by reducing anxiety over time. So the idea really is you can do this with video and photographs as well. So you actually get the person to sort of see the situation or to imagine being in a plane is another way of doing it. And they use their imagination to actually being in the plane. And this actually can help them to feel as though they're in the plane, but obviously they know they're safe, but they're still actually expressing their exposure and overcoming their exposure by being in that plane. So another form of exposure is actually what happens with worry is that people really focus on their physical sensations with worry. A good example is heart rate goes up or shortness of breath. And the problem with this is that if you actually think there's something wrong with your heart or your shortness of breath, you obviously interpret that as some sort of catastrophizing or disaster. So that often makes things worse. So if you start to get more and more anxious, what happens is your heart rate goes up and your breath becomes even shorter. And that's actually how sort of panic comes up. So actually worrying about these symptoms can be very, very difficult. But actually, if you learn to actually control these sensations in a controlled environment, you can actually learn that these responses are not harmful, and that can really help the stress associated with worrying about these physical sensations. So these are some of the strategies that I use for worry. But I quite like to explain a little bit more about mindfulness and ACT. Would that be okay, Ian?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Okay, thank you. So um, those strategies I just described with cognitive behavior therapy, they're quite hard to do on your own, really. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about mindfulness because I think that will be really helpful that people can do mindfulness. They can try that on their own. And the most simplest definition of mindfulness is simply to work on focusing on the present moment as much as you can with a sense of curiosity rather than judgment. And these are some specific mindfulness skills here that I think can help with worry. So the first one is mindful breathing. And this simply involves focusing your attention on your breath and simply observing each inhalation and exhalation without attempting to change the breathing pattern. By simply focusing on the attention of the breath, this can really help people to focus on right at the moment, right now. And by doing this, this helps to stop the rumination and the worry about the past or future events. And it can also help us to regulate our emotions and decrease our anxiety levels. So that's simple breathing, just focusing on your breathing. Another way you can do is called body scan meditation. And this is quite nice to do at night, where you can actually just sort of lie down. And simply what you do, you just go through and you direct your attention through different parts of your body and just observing any sensations there without judging them. This in itself can really help people to feel more relaxed, increase their awareness of body sensations, but actually not buying into those anxieties of the body sensations, just accepting they're there. And that's fine as well. So this can really help with release physical stress and fosters a sense of calm. It's really important actually when you do any kind of meditation, the goal is not to be calm. The goal is just to practice being where you are at that particular time as well. If you actually start to feel calm, that's a sort of like a side benefit. Another thing is simply observing your thoughts, feelings, or external triggers without working on having any attachment or reaction to them. By simply being curious and open, people can learn to witness their experiences without becoming overwhelmed. So, this helps us to recognize that we have thoughts and we have feelings, but they don't actually define us, they're just there. And we can just also acknowledge that they don't last. And therefore, we can sort of see them just for what they are, allow them just to be there and not react to them, and allow them just to move, and reminding ourselves that things will change. Another two of my favorite ones. So, one is called a loving kindness meditation, and it's also known as a metta meditation. And I really like this because it actually involves focusing on feelings of love and kindness towards ourselves and others. So actually saying to yourself, may you have a good day, may you feel joy, wishing that on your friends, wishing that on your family, wishing that on your neighbours, wishing it on the world. And the benefit of doing this is that by wishing people well, wishing them joy, you're cultivating positive emotions. And that actually moves away from negative associated states associated with worry. And actually, regular practice by doing this has actually helped people to feel a sense of connectedness with others, as well as feeling better about their emotions. So that's a lovely one to do. And the last one on mindfulness is I want to do is called mindful movement. And this is good in many, many ways. So all it simply means is incorporating mindfulness into our physical activities. And this could be yoga, walking, anything that you actually do. It could be cycling, it can be running, whatever you actually like doing. So the idea again is to encourage this present moment awareness while doing the movement. And this can really help us to connect our mind and our body. It can help us to feel more relaxed and reduce anxiety. Um, and simply what I notice if I do this, by actually sort of being more in the moment, is actually more enjoyable because you're leaving your worries behind. You're actually focusing on enjoying the activity, looking around while you're walking, enjoying the environment as well. And so that could be very good for our mental health and well-being. So that's some of the mindfulness practices I think help with worry.
Absolutely fascinating, Wendy. Really, really interesting. Um, they sound easy. Are they as easy as you describe them?
I think that's a really good point, Ian. Very, very good point. And like anything, they do take time and practice. It sounds very easy, doesn't it, to stay in the moment, but our minds are constantly worrying that this is the whole problem, is it? We're always worrying about something. We're worrying about the future or the past. So you have to constantly keep going, try to keep, always, don't judge yourself if you actually start to go and worry about the future or the past, but say, okay, here I are there, my mind's gone off again, and then bring it back into the present moment. Um, and the other thing you can actually do is you can sometimes it helps to follow some meditations. And there's examples on my website and on your website as well. So actually just sort of getting the idea through listening to a meditation can actually help to focus, especially if you haven't done it for the first time. And finally, if it's okay with you, and I'd just like to talk about another therapy, which I think is really, really good for worry, and it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. Um, so a couple of things from here. So one thing is called it's called cognitive diffusion. And what that actually means is that encouraging people to have a different relationship with their thoughts by really looking at what the words that we use is very interesting. Um, so one example of this is if we have a fear word, say we have a fear word of dog. Actually, what you can do is just keep repeating that word until it loses its meaning. It just becomes like another word in the English dictionary. And actually, you can then say that these are just words rather than absolute truths. So that's one way of doing that as well. Just looking at our relationship with our thoughts. Another key component of ACT is acceptance. And this is where we encourage people just to embrace their thoughts and feelings without attempting to change them, by just accepting what's going on with our thoughts and feelings. We can actually work on actually the struggle that we often have with unwanted thoughts and feelings. Acceptance that these are simply thoughts in your mind. It's the power that you give them is the problem. So if you can recognize that you're giving them power, it allows you to move away from those thoughts and feelings and then to focus more on meaningful actions in spite of these thoughts and feelings being there and present. And there are ways to actually focus on things that are more important to you. And this is called a values exercise. And this is really good because it encourages people to identify what is really, really important to that person in various aspects of their life. For example, what's important to you regarding your relationship, your career, your personal growth, or your health, or your hobbies. And actually just thinking about it and writing down, clarifying what's important to you, helps us to provide a sense of direction and a motivation, and helps people to really think about what is important in their life and to commit to actions that support that, so that they're spending less time worrying about things that are going wrong. They're actually enjoying things and engaging in meaningful activities. And the last one is committed action. So building on finding out what's important to you, what in various areas of your life. And again, as you talked about, Ian, in your previous podcast, setting achievable goals that aligns with one's values can really help to actually have a plan to engage in these values. So again, what it does is by having a committed action, you're actually saying, I'm not going to have these values. I'm actually going to behave and work towards these values as well. So for example, if you actually want to increase your health and well-being, it's important to me, your value is because I want to lead a healthy life and I don't want to have, lots of health problems and everything like that. And then your committed action is to write down exactly what you're going to do behind that as well. So it really helps with motivation. So your committed action might be, again, getting back to the setting goals, is I'm going to go for a walk 3 times a week for 30 minutes. But I'm going to, however I feel, or whatever's going on in my life, I'm committed to that action. So the commitment's really important. So, for example, just to summarize, if we're going back to a person who has heard on the news that the situation is that employment's going to get worse, there's going to be a load of job losses. So the person therefore interprets that they're going to lose their job. The first thing they can see is that this is a future threat. It hasn't happened yet. So being aware that it is a future, focus on the moment and don't engage in a future threat. And what I can do instead is focus on meaningful activities that give my life a sense of joy and purpose. And even if there is a little bit of worry or threat, the idea is to go back and do the problem solving method. So just in case I have any fear that I might reduce my job, what can I do about it to actually keep my job? So, okay, so I need to make sure I don't do anything stupid. I don't do, I make sure I'm on time at work. Um, and then also maybe I should look at making sure I have some savings aside just in case it happens. I've got a little bit of a cushion. So that's an example of a practical problem solving element to overcome your worry. So that's it, Ian. They're my tips for today.
That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So, finally, if people have listened to everything that you've said, and they think, okay, so maybe I need some sort of professional help, what should people do next?
Well, my website's called wendycastellino.com, which is my name. So hopefully it's fairly easy to remember. You can just Google my name and it should come up. And you can contact me via there and actually inquire if you actually want any therapy. And there's lots of free resources and meditations on there, which are completely free that you can download and start practicing today. There's lots of sort of handouts as well on there as well that you can try. And what about you, Ian?
Yeah, so Hope Therapy and Counselling uh, have a website, www.hopeforminds.co.uk. That's www.hopeforminds.co.uk. We work with people all around the country. We work with worry, we work with anxiety in its various forms. So people are very, very welcome to take a look at the website. We have lots of free resources there. We also offer free consultations, so people can just talk through what they're looking for support with in a really unpressurized way. Um, so again, www.hopefulminds.co.uk. So really, just for me to thank you for today, Wendy. It's been absolutely fascinating listening to you talk about what is an incredibly important subject which affects so many people. Thank you very much for all that you shared. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you too, Ian, and also for all our listeners. Thank you.